She said I was selfish, right after I paid her rent, canceled my weekend plans to comfort her through another breakdown, and skipped my art showcase to sit in a hospital lobby waiting for her mother's results. You only care about yourself. Zeke, she spat. You always have. The words didn't sting. Not this time. Because for the first time in 3 years, I finally saw her for who she was, and for who I had let myself become. Zara stood in the center of our living room, framed. By the dim light filtering through the curtains, one hand on her hip, the other gripping her phone like it was a weapon. Her lips trembled, but not from sadness, from frustration, because I wasn't fighting back. That's what she wanted. That's what she always wanted. Nothing to say? She asked. I looked at her calmly. I think I've said everything I ever needed to, Zara. You just didn't listen, she laughed, cold, dismissive. You want to play the victim now? No, I said, picking up my sketchbook, the one she once called a childish hobby. I just want to leave with what's left of me. She followed me to the door. So that's it? You're done? Yeah, I said without turning around. I'm done bleeding for someone who keeps calling the stains artificial. I walked out before she could respond, the echo of the door clicking shut louder than any of our old arguments. Outside it was raining. Not the soft, poetic kind. The heavy, unforgiving kind that soaked through everything. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing back inside to fix something. I just walked. One step, then another. Each one quieter, lighter. By the time I reached the street corner, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I didn't know where I was going yet. I didn't have a plan. But I knew this. She called me selfish, and maybe now I finally was. Thank God, my name's Zeke. I used to think love meant sacrifice. The more you gave up, the more you proved it was real. The more it hurt, the deeper it must have been. That's what Zara taught me. I met her when I was 21. She was magnetic. You didn't just look at her, you were pulled in. The kind of girl who could make a room stop just by walking in. The kind of girl who didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. And I fell. Hard. I wasn't naive. I knew she came with baggage, a sharp tongue, a past filled with stories that never quite added up, a habit of testing people just to see if they'd stay. But I didn't care. I thought love meant staying, no matter what. In the beginning, Zara was everything. She laughed at my dry humor, called my sketches genius even when they were rough. She told her friends I was real, not like the others. She made me feel like I was the only one who saw the version of her behind the performance. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. She hated my work hours, said I spent too much time on commissions. She started comparing me to her ex, to her friend's boyfriend, to her father. She cried when I missed a dinner, then stayed out all night the day I landed my first art feature. It was a cycle. Push, pull, apologize, repeat. Still, I stayed. I started turning down jobs if she needed me. She didn't like me working late, so I did it in secret. I skipped exhibitions, sold work under a pseudonym because she said attention made her uncomfortable. And every time I thought about leaving, she'd break. Cry in my arms. Tell me I was her only piece. Tell me no one had ever stayed before. So I did. I stayed. I stayed when she screamed at me for things I didn't do. I stayed when she accused me of cheating just because I smiled at the waitress. I stayed when she said I didn't love her enough. I kept giving. Quietly, patiently, until there was nothing left to give. There's something hollow about realizing that you've been in a one-sided relationship for years. You wake up one day, and you don't recognize yourself. You're not angry. You're not even sad. You're just tired. That's what I felt the morning I walked out. No fireworks, no final shouting match, just silence. Zara didn't chase me that day. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't ask where I went, which told me more than any apology ever could. She wasn't surprised I left. She was surprised I hadn't left sooner. The truth is, Zara didn't want a partner. She wanted a mirror, someone to reflect her back to herself, someone to stay still while she stormed, someone to blame when she broke. And I let her. For 3 years, I let her. I gave her everything she asked for, even when it cost me parts of myself I can't get back. I gave her my time, my patience, my creativity. I even gave her my silence, and the moment I started asking for anything in return, that's when she said I was selfish. That's when she told me I had changed. But the truth is, I hadn't changed. I just remembered who I was before her, and once I remembered, I couldn't pretend anymore. My name is Zeke, and this is the story of how I stopped apologizing for putting myself first. It started with something small. Most betrayals do. Zara had been distant for a few weeks, not in the usual sulking or passive-aggressive way. This was quieter, colder, like she was preparing for something and didn't want to tip me off. She stopped asking where I was going, stopped checking my phone when I left it on the table, stopped complaining when I stayed at the studio late. It should have felt like peace. But it didn't. It felt like silence before a storm. One night, I came home and found her sitting on the balcony with her legs crossed, scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up when I stepped inside. "Hey," I said, hanging my jacket. "You eat? No. You want me to cook something? No." That was it. No eye contact, no follow-up, just no. I should have known then. I stood there for a minute, waiting for her to say more. She didn't. So I walked into the kitchen and started making something anyway. Pasta, because it was quick, simple. Something I knew she liked. I left a plate on the table for her, went to shower, and when I came back out, hers was untouched. But her phone wasn't. It buzzed, glowed, locked, 3 times. I couldn't help it. I looked. Koa. "She still doesn't know you're coming tomorrow?" Koa. "You're cold, Zara. I like it." Koa. "Don't chicken out." My blood went still. I stared at the screen, trying to convince myself it wasn't what it looked like. But it was. I knew it because I had met Koa before. He was the guy who always called at odd hours. The one she swore was just a friend from college. The one she never introduced me to properly, even when we ran into him at the bookstore. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't touch her phone, didn't yell, I just went to bed. But I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until morning, waiting for her to say something, waiting for her to come clean. She didn't. The next night, she said she was going out to meet an old friend. I nodded. "Have fun." She paused, like she was waiting for me to ask who. I didn't, because I already knew. She came back late, smelling like someone else's cologne and shame. I watched her sneak into bed like I was asleep, and I waited again. Waited for honesty. Waited for even a sliver of guilt. It never came. Days passed, like that. I knew what was happening. She knew I knew. But we both kept playing the parts we had memorized too well. Until one night she walked into the living room while I was sketching, stood with her arms folded and said, "You've changed." I blinked at her. "What do you mean?" "You're cold." I looked at her and placed my pencil down gently. "You mean I'm not bleeding for you anymore?" She flinched. "You don't ask where I go. You don't get jealous. You don't argue anymore." I stopped auditioning for someone who already picked another lead. Silence. That's when her voice cracked. "I didn't sleep with him." "I never said you did." "But you think I did." I stood, walked past her. Not because I wanted to avoid the conversation, but because there was nothing left to discuss. "Zeke," she said. "Talk to me." I turned around. "You lied. You let someone else take up the space I was holding for you. Then when I stepped back, you called it distance." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You said you'd never leave. And you said you'd never stop loving me." She walked toward me, reached for my hand. I let her touch it, just once, then I pulled away. I know I messed up, she whispered. You didn't mess up, I said. You made a choice, and I made mine. I grabbed my bag, walked out the door, and this time, there was no suitcase, just my sketchbook, and the pieces of myself I still had time to salvage. Out in the hallway, I took a deep breath and whispered it aloud for the first time. She betrayed me, not with another man, but with the belief that I'd stay, no matter how much she broke me. That was the real betrayal, that she thought I wouldn't save myself. But I did. Zeke couldn't sleep. Not because of noise, not because of guilt, because of everything that wasn't being said. He lay on the floor of his new apartment, a thin blanket under his back, and a rolled-up hoodie for a pillow. It wasn't comfortable, but comfort wasn't what he needed. What he needed was peace. But peace didn't come easy when your heart was trying to untangle years of silence. His phone buzzed again. He didn't check it. He didn't need to. It was Zara. Since the day he walked out, she had texted 3 times. You left without really talking. Was I really that awful? I hope you're proud of what you've done. He read them all, replied to none. Because if he replied, he knew he'd fall into the same loop. Justifying pain, explaining boundaries, apologizing for saving himself. He had done that for years, and he was exhausted. The silence now wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. But at least it was honest. Zeke got up and walked to the window. The city lights blinked faintly in the distance. Other people's lives, moving on. He used to think love meant fixing. That if someone was breaking, it was his job to hold their pieces. That being needed was the same as being loved. But it wasn't. Zara had never truly needed him. She needed a version of him that didn't say no. That didn't make her reflect. That would let her damage him and call it passion. He stared at the sketch on his desk. It was unfinished. A figure kneeling, hands open, eyes hollow. It looked like him. The him that had stayed too long. He took the pencil and added something new. A hand reaching down from above. But it wasn't someone else's hand. It was his own. He was pulling himself up. The next morning, Mira called. She didn't ask about Zara, didn't mention drama. She just said, "Hey, there's an open studio space downtown. Come paint." Zeke hesitated, then nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "Yeah, I'll be there." He hadn't picked up a paintbrush in weeks. Not seriously. Not with intention. But the moment he stepped into that sunlit room and dipped the brush into color, something inside him softened. Not everything hurt. Not everything was sharp and bitter. There was still beauty. Still breath. That night, Zara called. Zeke stared at the screen. Let it ring. She didn't leave a voicemail. Instead, she sent a message. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were in so much pain." Zeke locked the phone and set it aside. He wasn't angry. Not anymore. But he wasn't going back. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some days he still woke up expecting her voice. Still missed the way. She'd laugh at his dumbest jokes. Still felt that ache in his chest when he passed their favorite coffee spot. But the difference now was that he didn't reach for his phone. He didn't bargain with himself. He let the ache pass through him like a wave, because grief is just love with nowhere to go. And he had to let it move. Zeke painted through the night. Lines became shapes. Shapes became meaning. And when he looked down at the canvas, he saw something new. Not himself, broken, not her, leaving, but a door, open, with light on the other side. For the first time in a long time, Zeke smiled. He still didn't know where he was going, but he knew this. He wasn't lost anymore, he was just becoming. Zeke was adjusting, not fully healed, far from it, but his days no longer felt like fragments. He painted every morning, met Mira for coffee twice a week, and slowly began to reclaim the version of himself that existed before Zara ever touched his world. But just when the edges began to soften, the twist came, loud, messy, and public. He was at a small gallery showcase in the West End when it happened. Mira had convinced him to submit 2 new pieces anonymously. It wasn't a big event, just local artists sharing space and stories. The last thing he expected was to see Zara standing across the room, staring at his work. Not by accident, she was with a man, Koa tall, smug, too well dressed for a neighborhood gallery. He stood behind her with his hand on her waist like he owned her, but Zara's eyes weren't on him. They were locked on the piece Zeke had submitted, the door with the light on the other side. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't soft either, it was shaken. He watched from the corner, unseen, breath caught somewhere between his lungs and throat. He didn't want confrontation, not here, not like this. But the universe wasn't offering choices that night. Kauai spotted him first, smiled, smug and victorious, and said loudly enough for everyone around to hear, well, if it isn't the ghost himself. Zeke didn't move. Zara turned sharply toward the sound of Koa's voice, and then she saw him, and the world stilled. She stepped forward slowly, hesitantly, like approaching something sacred or broken. Zeke, he nodded. Zara, I didn't know you'd be here. You're not the only one who paints, he said evenly. Koa chuckled behind her. You sure this guy's the one who walked away from you? Doesn't look like he's over it? Zeke didn't flinch. He looked at Zara. Did you come here to show me off, or to figure out what you lost? Zara's face flushed. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, because she knew. She wasn't there for art. She was there because she'd been watching his name rise quietly in the creative circles. Because Mira had posted one of his pieces. Because people were starting to notice, and she couldn't take it. She wasn't used to him glowing without her shadow. You said I was selfish, he said. And now you're here, dragging the man you left me for into the middle of something that doesn't belong to you anymore. Koa laughed. So dramatic. You think anyone cares about your scribbles? Zeke took a step forward. Calm, unshaken. I don't care if they do, he said, but you do? That's why you're here. Zara blinked, and for the first time she looked like the one unraveling. Not him. Not anymore. Mira appeared behind him just then, sliding next to him like quiet reinforcement. She didn't need to speak. Her presence said enough, and that made it worse. Zara's eyes narrowed at the way Zeke leaned slightly toward Mira, at the way he didn't look back at her anymore. Koa whispered something in her ear, but she didn't react. She just stood there, eyes darting between Zeke and Mira, fury and confusion twisting her face into something unfamiliar. I hope you find what you're looking for, Zeke said quietly. Then he turned his back on her and walked away. This time, she was the one left standing in silence, and this time she was the one watching him disappear. Zeke didn't expect to see her again so soon. Not after the gallery scene. Not after the silence that followed. But 2 weeks later, just hours before his debut solo exhibition, Zara showed up. Not outside. Not at the entrance. Inside. Backstage. Zeke was reviewing the lighting layout with Mira and the event coordinator. When he turned and saw her standing by the edge of the curtain, his heart didn't jump. It paused, long enough for him to brace. Give us a minute, he said to Mira. She didn't like it, but she nodded and walked off. Zara stepped forward slowly, as if unsure she still had permission to enter his life. She didn't, but she came. Anyway, you're doing really well, she said, glancing at the setup. This place is beautiful. He didn't thank her, didn't smile. He waited. She looked down at her hands. Her nails were perfectly manicured. No ring, no trace of Koa. I didn't come here to fight, she whispered. Then why are you here, Zara? She exhaled shakily. Because I realized I never saw you. Not really. I saw what I wanted you to be. But not you. Zeke stayed quiet. I saw your work the night of the gallery, she continued. I went home and stared at that sketch online, the one with the open door, and I couldn't stop crying. Because you missed me? No, she said. Because I didn't recognize the man who painted it. And it hit me that maybe I never really knew you. Maybe I didn't want to. Zeke looked at her now, fully. She looked smaller, not weaker, just finally stripped of the armor she wore for so long. I was selfish, she said. You told me that without ever saying it. You just left. You finally left, Zeke, and I realized I never thought you would. He nodded slowly. You knew I'd bend, he said. You counted on it. Because I always did. Her eyes welled up. I thought you needed me. I did, he admitted. I needed to matter to someone, but I mistook attention for love. I mistook possession for intimacy, and that's on me. A long pause stretched between them. I'm not with Koa anymore, she said suddenly. Zeke's jaw tightened. That's not why you're here, right? No, she whispered. I'm not asking for you back. I need to say it. I need you to know that I see it now. All of it. The dinners you missed for me, the sketches you didn't finish, the way you shrank so I could feel bigger. Zeke swallowed. His throat burned, not from pain, but from the storm of almosts crashing inside him, almost fixing her, almost losing himself forever, almost never leaving. I loved you, he said. She blinked fast, tears spilling over. I know. And that's what destroyed me. Zara let out a broken laugh through her crying. I never deserved you. No, Zeke said quietly. You didn't. And somehow that hurt her more than anything else he could have said. She turned to leave, but then paused. Will you be okay? She asked, without looking back. I already am. And that was the truth. She walked out of the backstage area, back into the crowd, back into the noise of the world she still needed to belong to. And Zeke just stood there, surrounded by his work. The lights, the empty chairs soon to be filled. He expected to feel shaken, but instead, all he felt was clarity. Mira returned a few minutes later. You good? She asked gently. He looked at her and smiled. Yeah, I'm good. The exhibition opened with a quiet energy, like a breath held between heartbeats. People wandered in, some whispered, some stared, some just stood, letting his work speak where words couldn't. But Zeke wasn't watching the crowd. He was watching Mira. She stood by his largest piece, the one with two figures walking away from each other, both finally standing tall. When she caught him looking, she smiled. The kind of smile that didn't demand anything. The kind that said, I see you. That night, a reporter asked him during an interview, what inspires your work the most? Zeke thought of Zara, of the nights he bled himself dry trying to be enough, of the silence, the sacrifice, the loneliness he wore like skin, and he said, loss. But also, what comes after it? The interviewer smiled. And what comes after? Zeke looked across the room at Mira. She was laughing softly at something the curator said, eyes crinkling, genuine, and he answered, freedom. Later, after the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, Mira came to him with a cup of lukewarm coffee and a sleepy smile. You did it, she said. We did it. She tilted her head. So, what's next? Zeke looked around at the empty space, at the walls once filled with pain, now echoing with peace. I'm going to keep creating, he said. But this time for me? Mira nodded. And the rest? He looked at her carefully. You mean us? She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I'm not ready for promises, he said. But I'm ready to try. Mira stepped closer. Then try. And for the first time, Zeke leaned into something without fear. Not because he was running from the past, but because he had finally turned the page, and he wasn't looking back. The exhibition ran 5 days. All 5 were sold out. Zeke's name was now spoken with reverence across collector circles, whispered on industry forums, plastered across magazine spreads with headlines like, The Rebirth of a Quiet Genius. But none of that mattered more than what it gave him back. His name, his voice, his power. He wasn't just healing anymore. He was rising. The day after the show ended, he woke up to dozens of offers, collaborations, brand partnerships, gallery, tours. Mira handled most of them, filtering what was worth his time. She never pressured, never pushed. She knew he needed space to breathe in this new chapter. But something else arrived that morning. A letter, hand-delivered, from Oriole Studios, one of the biggest creative houses in the country. Zara once told him it was her dream to work with them. She spent years trying to even get a meeting. Now they were asking him to sign as their creative director. Zeke smiled without joy, not because of the offer, but because of the attached memo. They were terminating their upcoming deal with Koa Everson and Co-Effective immediately. No explanation given. Just a sudden, cold end to a partnership that had taken Zara's new man over a year to lock in. And now it was gone. Zeke didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He accepted the position the next day. Quietly. Professionally. And as his first act, he reached out to his legal team. Not to go after Zara. To reclaim the artwork she once tried to suppress. The ones she insisted were too emotional to release. The ones he shelved to keep the peace. He released them all under a limited collection titled The Weight of Silence. Each one came with a single sentence. For the parts of myself I buried just to be loved. The collection sold out in under 4 hours. 1 week later, Zeke stood in front of the mirror of his new studio. Larger space, full windows, plants he hadn't killed yet. A place that felt like breath. Mira walked in, holding 2 coffees. You're on the front page of Art Rend magazine? Zeke raised an eyebrow. Did they spell my name right this time? She grinned. Twice. He chuckled softly, accepting the drink. Thanks. There was a pause. The kind that meant something. Then she said, You know Zara showed up at my office? Zeke turned slowly. When? Yesterday. She didn't. See me. I was walking out for lunch. She was in the lobby, asking the receptionist about you. He nodded once, not surprised. Mira studied his face. You okay? I'm great, he said, and he meant it. But part of him wondered, not about her, about why she'd come. He found out 3 days later, Zara called. This time he answered. Her voice was smaller, like something had cracked and she didn't know how to hold the pieces anymore. I lost everything, Zeke, she said. No hello, no preamble, just devastation. Koa? He asked calmly. He walked. Said I was too much trouble now. That ever. Since the gallery night, his reputation's been spiraling. And you? They dropped me. My agency, my brand, everything. It's like people know. Her voice shook. They know I tried to dim you. Zeke said nothing. He let the weight of her words hang. Do you think I'm a monster? She asked quietly. He thought about it. No, he said finally. I think you were scared. Of being ordinary. Of being outshined. So you held on to the one person who wouldn't fight back. She sobbed softly. You hate me. I don't, he said. Because hating you would mean you still take up space in my heart. And you don't. Another beat of silence. Then she asked the question he was waiting for. Is there any way back? Zeke looked out the window at the city skyline. His city now. His story. No, he said. There isn't. You chose control over connection. You chose power over partnership. And now I've chosen peace. She cried harder. He didn't comfort her. He didn't need to. She was mourning what she lost, and what she lost was him. Not the version she manipulated, but the man he became after he walked away. He hung up. The call, quietly, blocked the number. For good this time. That evening, Mira found him on the rooftop balcony of the studio. Sunset painting the sky in soft blush and fading gold. Everything okay? She asked. Zeke nodded. I just closed the last chapter. She came to stand beside him. And? He exhaled. It felt clean. No anger, just final. Mira leaned on the railing. So what now, rising star? Zeke looked at her, really looked. This woman who never once tried to change him, who stood by him without asking for his soul in return. I'm thinking of painting something new, he said. Oh? She smiled. What's the title? Zeke stepped closer, his voice low, sure, soft. What love looks like when it doesn't. Hurt. And then he kissed her. Slow, certain, no tension, no war, no damage, just truth and healing, and finally, home.